Jeep's Grand Cherokee is one of the few American imports to gain a foothold in the British market, in fourth generation form trying to offer something a little different to luxury SUV buyers who'd normally be looking at a Land Rover Discovery, a BMW X5 or a Mercedes M-Class. On paper, it looks like the brand's most credible car yet. When it comes to SUV 4x4s, large luxury models must be the most difficult to design. High prices mean high expectations from well-heeled customers, often considering cars like this as an alternative to their usual BMW 5 Series, Mercedes E-Class or Audi A6. People who, somewhat unreasonably, expect a big, plush off-roader to handle like a sports saloon, yet still be able to tackle the Rubicon Trail. To suit them, the German premium brands bought us cars like BMW's X5, the Mercedes M-Class and the Audi Q7, models that talk the talk on tarmac but often fail to walk the walk off it. Like its natural rival Land Rover, Jeep has always taken a different approach, refusing to compromise off the beaten track while claiming its Grand Cherokee to be a match for its Teutonic rivals on the highway. In truth, through 3 generations stretching all the way back to 1993, it never has been, until now, and this 4th generation model. Here, the approach is very different from before. This model's predecessor had a rather utilitarian Jeep chassis that was fine for off-roading, but rather wobbly for taut on-road handling. This model, in contrast, adopts a more pragmatic approach, borrowing its platform from the 3rd generation Mercedes M-Class in an attempt to get on terms with the segment leaders. At the same time, to assuage fears from committed Jeep fans worried that this might compromise performance off-piste, a clever select terrain traction control system has been mated to the Quadra-Track 2 4x4 setup, and the option of Quadra-Lift air suspension provided to get you places that Audi, BMW and even Mercedes SUV customers could only dream about. It's all enough to create a car that deserves a fresh look from luxury sector SUV buyers, from a brand now Fiat financed with a bright future ahead of it. A future that should begin with this car. Let's check it out. Now, scanning the specs for this car, there's one figure that jumps out at me more than any other. The 146% increase in structural rigidity that it enjoys over its predecessor. Now this, more than anything else, gives you some idea of the step forward in driving dynamics that this 4th generation Grand Cherokee had to make. Without such a stiff platform, any car in this sector is going to exhibit the sort of slow-witted, roly-poly handling and poor standards of NVH, that's noise, vibration and harshness, that characterised the previous version of this model. And if you've had previous experience of that vehicle, then you've only got to drive this one to the end of your road and back to realise how much better it is. But try and go a bit further than that. Then you'll appreciate standards of ride quality and refinement that it's difficult to improve upon in this class, whichever of the German alternatives you favour. Now, the refinement bit was something of a surprise to me, given the installation in this car of what is essentially a Fiat engine. This never a brand particularly noted for its whisper-quiet, large-capacity diesel power plants. But no, this 237 brake horsepower 3-litre V6 is actually very good. Perhaps a bit noisier than its Teutonic rivals at idling speeds, but every bit as quiet on the highway. You could be in a Mercedes. In fact, in some ways you are, given that this car is based on the same platform as the Stuttgart brand's M-Class. Performance is acceptably fleet for this kind of car. Rest to 60, occupying 8.2 seconds on the way to a top speed of 126 miles an hour. Those are the kind of figures that can't quite match the German competition, but shame those of a Land Rover Discovery 4. In fact, the only real issue on the performance front is the fact that you access this performance via an automatic gearbox with just 5 speeds in an era where competitors offer 7 or sometimes 8 ratios. Fortunately, the diesel engine's prodigious 550 newton meters of torque keeps cog swapping to a minimum and provides for a 3,500 kilogram brake trailer towing weight. And around the lanes, well, this is no BMW X5, but it's a world away from anything Jeep has offered before in this sector, with a level of steering feel that actually gives you decent feedback at the helm. What really makes this car, though, is a system that unfortunately is limited only to buyers of the priciest version. And it's called Quadralift. It's an air suspension setup with 4 corner springs, there to not only give a cushioned magic carpet ride, but also to lower the car by just over half an inch for optimal high-speed cruising. And they can also lower it by a further inch at parking speeds for easier passenger entry and exit. Where you really get the benefit, though, is when you venture off the beaten track. Now, the Quadralift system offers a couple of off-road settings able to respectively lift the car either 9.4 or 10.7 inches off the ground. And that could be enough to make unnecessary Jeep's provision of a removable front spoiler for gnarlier off-road expeditions. And it's in such circumstances that you'll appreciate the other high-tech highlight of this car, the Select Terrain traction response system. Now, it's standard on all versions, and it gives you the choice of up to 5 different options to perfectly suit the car for whatever terrain you're going to cross. So there are 3 off-road options that I access via this circular button by the gear stick here. Either rock, sand, mud or snow. There's also a sport setting which is geared for on-tarmac use, and an auto option if you really can't be bothered to choose. It'll set the car up to suit whatever situation you're in. But none of this trickery would be much use were not the basic tenets to be in place for exemplary off-road performance. In principle, thanks to its Quadra-Track 2 4x4 system, this Jeep seems to have them. So there's a proper 2-stage transfer case with a low-range setting that I can access by this button here that gives me a whole set of extra ratios for really tough off-road work. It's clever enough to route as much as 100% of torque to the axle with most traction. But because you can't manually lock the differentials to ease yourself out of the very worst off-road situations, this Jeep can't match the best of its rivals in the muck. If you've opted for a variant like this one without Quadralift air suspension, you might occasionally find yourself lacking a little bit of ground clearance too. Mind you, you'd have to be venturing somewhere fairly extreme for that to be an issue. Jeep claims that all Grand Cherokees can offer 280mm of ground clearance at the front and 255mm of ground clearance at the rear, which will enable braver owners to wade through up to 508mm of water. You'll be equally surprised to find how far this car will go on the hilly stuff too. Provided you remove the front air dam, there's a 34.3 degree approach angle to slopes that the hill assist control will help you up. And once the hill descent control, accessed via this button here, has eased you down the slope, there's a useful 29.3 degree departure angle. Sideways tilt is dealt with by a 23.1 degree rollover breakover angle. Codenamed WK2, this is the 4th generation of Grand Cherokee that we've seen, and it's longer, wider and roomier than any of its predecessors, though it doesn't seem it. Clever contemporary styling disguising the bulk. The look is still recognisably Jeep though, with both of the brand's 2 most recognisable design cues, the classic squared off trapezoidal wheel arches and the traditional 7-slot Jeep front grille, both present and correct. There are smaller, meaner headlights, leading off what the stylists hope is a more muscular, athletic stance, emphasised by the steeply raked windscreen and the high waistline. Both front and rear overhangs have been shortened too, to give better approach and departure angles when off-road tackling really difficult terrain. The interior is a big step forward from that of its predecessor, and had to be to match the best of this car's German rivals. Jeep has worked really hard to ensure that all the things that you touch doors, console, armrests feel soft and tactile, and they're blended with real wood, chrome accents and stitching detailing to make the cabin feel really special. Now, if you look a little closer, there are hard plastics to be found on the glove box lid, for example, but overall this is a really good effort. You sit high up, grasping the traditional 3-spoke Jeep steering wheel, and bar some pretty thick rear C-pillars, all-round visibility across the cabin makes town work pretty straightforward. In the back, a 130mm increase in wheelbase enables this car to offer 100mm more legroom than its predecessor, which makes a big difference to a rear seat able to accommodate 3 adults on shorter journeys or 2 more comfortably on longer ones. And the rear seats recline by up to 18 degrees for greater comfort and headroom on really lengthy trips. Boot space is much improved on this model too, with up to 782 litres on offer, though you'll have to be careful not to scratch these lovely chrome strips. And that's even though the spare wheel is now inside the vehicle. It's under this false floor here, rather than mounted beneath it. Underneath here you've also got some extra storage space for valuables. And there are nice touches as well, like this removable torch. Now, if you do need more space, the 60/40 split folding rear seats drop to reveal a total of 1,554 litres of fresh air. At the opposite extreme, if you only want to put small items in, then there's the option of lifting the rear tailgate glass. Once upon a time, this car competed with the Range Rover. Today, that model is to be found in the more exclusive super luxury SUV segment. The Grand Cherokee, in contrast, has traditionally held a middle ground amongst plusher large SUVs, more powerful and upmarket than, say, a Toyota Land Cruiser or a Mitsubishi Shogun, but not quite as premium and aspirational as, say, a BMW X5, a Mercedes M-Class or an Audi Q7. Now, with this 4th generation Grand Cherokee, Jeep has moved closer to those premium brands in terms of both price and build quality. You're looking at a pricing spectrum of between £37,000 and £44,000 for the 3-litre V6 diesel that we're looking at here. Now, at the bottom end of that pricing bracket, you'd be paying the same kind of money that you would be for a comparable Land Rover Discovery 4. But saving about £4,000 over the car that I think is this Jeep's most natural competitor, the Volkswagen Touareg 3-litre TDI in 245 PS form. Now, at the top end of the Jeep's pricing bracket, at around £44,000 or £45,000, well, it's in direct competition there with the premium models, BMW's X5 3-litre D, the Mercedes ML 350 CDI, and the Audi Q7 3-litre TDI 245 PS. Now, none of these can match this Jeep spec, and only Land Rover's Discovery 4 can get close to this Grand Cherokee off-road. To suit those for whom too much power is never enough, Jeep is also offering a potent 6.4-litre V8 470 brake horsepower SRT8 petrol variant, there to offer a more affordable alternative to super high-performance luxury SUVs like BMW's X5M and Mercedes ML63 AMG. It will be a rare sight indeed here in the UK. Now, whatever spec you decide upon to go with the 3-litre V6 diesel engine in your Grand Cherokee, you'll find a decent kit list fitted as standard. So, all models get alloy wheels, automatic bi-xenon headlights, front fog lamps, tyre pressure monitoring, hill descent control, parking sensors, power folding heated electric door mirrors, leather trim, with electrically powered front seats and heated seats front and rear. There's a 9-speaker, 12-channel, 506-watt surround sound system with USB and iPod connectivity, of course. There's what Jeep calls a media center, marshalled by a 6.5-inch colour touchscreen that accesses a 30 gigabyte hard drive with a 6,700 song capacity. You've also got auto wipers, keyless entry and go, Bluetooth compatibility for your mobile phone. There's a colour rear parking camera, dual zone climate control, and a hill start assist system to stop you drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Unfortunately, you've to stretch to the much pricier Overland model for the Quadra-Lift air suspension that really makes this car what it is. But if you do go for Overland spec, also included in the package is a set of performance brakes with sport suspension. You also get Jeep's advanced Uconnect sat-nav system. There's also a huge panoramic command view glass roof, larger 20-inch wheels, an electric tailgate, wood inserts, high quality Napa leather for the air-conditioned seats. There's also leather on the dashboard and a heated steering wheel. Safety kit runs to all the usual electronic assistance for stability, traction and braking, plus an ERM electronic roll mitigation system and a trailer stabilisation setup. Now there are multi-stage front airbags, side curtain airbags and supplemental side airbags, as you would expect in a car of this kind, together with anti-whiplash front head restraints. If you want more on the safety front, then you'll need to stretch to the top of the range Overland model that adds a blind spot information system able to warn you if you're likely to dangerously pull out and overtake another driver. There's also adaptive cruise control, able to automatically regulate your distance to the car in front on the highway. And there's a forward collision mitigation system that will warn you if you're about to hit another car at urban speeds. Running costs for this 4th generation Grand Cherokee are far superior to those of the model it replaced, thanks to its far more efficient Euro 5 compatible Italian designed Fiat and VM Motori 3-litre V6 diesel. Take CO2, a figure that was up around 270 grams per kilometre with the previous version of this model. Now it's down to a far more acceptable 218 grams per kilometre, a reduction that Fiat reckons will save potential owners around £1,220 in VED taxation over a typical 5-year ownership period. Now, that's all enough to overshadow quite substantially the CO2 figure of a rival Land Rover Discovery 4, if not quite to be able to equal the standards set by cars like BMW's X5 or an equivalent Audi Q7. In terms of fuel consumption, this model is also much improved over its predecessor, the 34 miles to the gallon combined cycle showing, meaning that you'll go a couple of extra miles on every gallon in comparison to the 300 kilograms heavier rival Land Rover Discovery 4. Though, as before, that's still not quite up to the standards of the best of the German opposition. Mind you, you still get around 700 miles out of a tank full at motorway speeds though. Residual values are less easy to gauge, but one thing's for certain, there'll be streets ahead of the previous version of this model. Though over 4 million Grand Cherokees have been sold over 2 decades, there's little doubt that this is the most credible version yet. Previous models were cars you bought because you liked the Jeep badge and because they offered plenty of equipment at a value for money price. But this one is the first to be able to proudly stand wheel to wheel against the best of its German rivals, none of whom can offer a specification to match it on-road or the four-wheel drive know-how to rival it off tarmac. Here's a luxury SUV that plots a middle ground. A Land Rover Discovery 4 might get you a little further off-road, a BMW X5 might feel a little sharper on it. But as a balance between the two, I could see this Grand Cherokee suiting a significant number of buyers in this segment very well, if only they could be persuaded to try it. If it's the little things that make life grand, then it's equally true to say that with this car, Jeep has got more of the right than ever before.